bad situations at work and so forth, but they're so hesitant to make a change, and it's their self-talk that's killing them.
I think the real problem with that is that every time we repeat that thought, whatever it is, and most of those thoughts are negative. Maybe 78% of all of the programs we have that we get from other people are negative, or they're counterproductive, or they work against us. And so what happens is when we think without thinking about it, we repeat those same programs. And here's the real problem, and it's the crux of the whole thing. Every time we think something, we're literally recording it in our brain. And every time we think it again and then again, we're literally rewiring our brain. And in fact, everyone listening right now is literally rewiring their brain while they're listening. So what are you going to put into it next? We put into it next usually what we have in it most.
That's a tragedy, really, if you think about it, because so many of us have been raised by parents who, in my opinion, based on my own experience with my parents and what I've heard from other people, many parents don't think before they speak. I have a family full of people, and it's not just my own parents, who got the habit of saying to their kids, "You're never going to amount to anything."
Yeah.
And people grow up believing that.
Awful.
Yeah, and that literally becomes true, and then they make it true, and they reinforce those programs, and then they'll even argue for them. They'll say, "No, that's just the way I am," and it's not just the way they were born to be. Nobody is born arguing. Nobody's born smoking. Nobody's born rich or poor. We might think that because of the circumstances we were born into, but no, the fact is we were all born with pretty much the same life opportunities. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have better chances early on or something like that, but we are clearly born to excel. And the motivational people are right about that. We're born with a great deal of promise and a great deal of potential. And when we go to the newborn infant ward at the hospital, and we look through that window and we see those little infants and their little bassinets, and they're hours old, and we look, and if they're awake and their eyes are open, you can literally see them searching for that incredible future in front of them. And then they get the first message, and then the next message, and then the next. And I often imagined when my kids were little, my sons were little, I imagined that if I couldn't talk to them for maybe a month, I couldn't say anything, but each of them had a little bitty keyboard strapped to his little bitty chest, and instead of saying anything, I had to type whatever it was I was going to say into that keyboard, and that was plugged right into their brain, and the brain, pretty much like a computer would record it. It literally changed and affected anything I said to my kids, because I realized you would never type in stupid or dummy. Now, I wasn't saying those things, but what about when you get angry, or what if you had a long day and you're upset and your kid comes home and he's got a bad report card, or he's done something wrong, and we're literally typing messages into their brains, and what we didn't realize is that their brains are they're designed to record all that stuff, and once they record it, and then we tell them the same thing again and again, so we're repeating it, that makes it stronger, and then the brain actually begins to wire connections, and it wires those messages in, and then they start repeating those things to themselves. And I think that is a fun deal, but fortunately we've learned in new research that we can actually rewire the brain that we got, and I think that's the good news.
Yeah, I think that's so.
How do we do that?
Exactly. Tom, the killer about that, and it's really fascinating that Chad talks about that in his new book. There was a lot of thinking, Tom, that once you got to be 20 or 25, that was it. That you were kind of fixed, that your brain lost its plasticity. But what Mr. Helmstetter is saying is that there's still great possibility actually throughout life to break free of bad patterns.
Well, we were told, and all of us were taught in school, that the brain stops growing, just like you were saying, Adam, that it stops growing sometime right around or after adolescence, and then we get a certain number of neurons, and that's it. And then those neurons, that makes up our brain power, and it's going to stay with us for the rest of our life. We were told that. We were told that our IQ is fixed. we were also told that we're pretty much going to live out our DNA. So we would even check out our parents to think, okay, which one of them do I hope I got more of their genes from, one or the other. And we were taught that because that's what science believed, and they believed that because they couldn't actually look into the brain while it was working. And then computer technology and imaging technology came along, and they could finally look in and watch what was really happening, and they discovered that they were totally wrong. Number one, our IQ isn't fixed. Number two, our DNA is not set, and it does not have to control our life. Three, the brain is not fixed, wired, and that's it. Your brain, it continues to grow throughout your entire life. No matter how old you are, you'll still be creating new brain cells. And so what I've been researching now and writing about are the fun and exciting ways to grow those new brain cells so that people don't have to get up on the wrong side of their programs every morning and live with them. They can do something about them.
All right, so what can we do? Again, with part of the programming we've all had is to be told that after a certain age, we become fixed in our thinking. I'm 57 years old, and I don't happen to believe that now that I am 57 years old, but that's what we've been told. And so that's part of the programming we've gotten. We've been told you can't learn languages, you can't learn how to play the piano, you can't start to play tennis, or whatever it is you think you would like to do, we're told you can't do it after a certain point. And by the same token, many of us grow up being told things that control our entire lives. Like when my parents told me that I couldn't learn to play the piano because that was something the rich people did.
Yeah. Well, you've really hit on an important thing, and that is, like, if the question is how do we start, what can we do to grow new neurons and maybe change some of the old programs we've got? There's really two ways to look at that. One is, and the most important first step is to change your self-talk. And we used to think that, our self-talk, that's just pretty much my personality, that's who I am. But no, every one of us has the ability to edit our self-talk and to change our self-talk and to get new self-talk. And if you always keep in mind that every single thought you think literally rewires your brain. Every thought you're thinking, all of your thoughts together are rewiring your brain. So if you've got some bad beliefs about yourself, and you've kind of got a feeling that maybe some of those aren't true, but it's just the way you are, it's the way you feel, it's the way you get up and think every morning. If you'd like to change that, you can actually, and this is really fascinating, you can actually practice repeating new self-talk. And that maybe sounds kind of funny at first, but you can actually, the more you repeat it, the more the brain will wire it in. And the more it wires it in, the more the brain begins to believe it. And then that's who you become. So you could say that you're literally creating the person you're going to be by what you're thinking today. So examining your self-talk, deciding to edit your self-talk, and deciding to change your self-talk, that's an important first step, and that's where I would start. The other side of it is, how do I get my brain to be sharper and smarter? And that you can actually do with activities. And interestingly, on all of the activities that I've researched that will grow new brain cells and actually make you smarter and more aware and more acute and so on, one of the first ones is to learn to play a musical instrument. And so I decided after all these years, that I would learn to play the piano formally. And then I studied this list, a long list of things you could do to increase your intelligence and the strength of your brain. And so I'm now learning to write with my other hand. I was left-handed all my life, so I decided to learn to write with my right hand. Another thing I did was I took up archery, and there are reasons why things like archery, which is a very precise kind of sport, it requires physical exertion, it requires focus and attention, and it requires to get good at it, it requires repetition. And if you look at it from a scientific point of view, each of those things is something that is designed to build new brain cells. And so I took up archery and other things like that. So you can study a new language, you can go back to school. There are all kinds of things. Usually, the easiest way to determine whether something is going to help your brain is, are you learning something actually new, or are you just doing something you did before, but you're just doing more of it?
One of the things that changed my life, which I now commend to other men who call me and tell me they're in a pickle, I literally got in my car and I drove to a point exactly halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco, a town called Hanford, California, which is an exit on the I-5. And got off, checked into one of the cheap motels off the freeway. I did not unload my laptop computer that was sitting in the trunk. I left it in the car. I did not bring my cell phone in. I sat down and I engaged myself in a series of exercises which were designed to try to remember what I thought made me special, different, and unique. I wrote a theme, 350 words, who is Tom? And wrote it until it was complete. I wrote a series of lists, my good points, my bad points, what people think about me, what I think about myself, what I bring to the table, things I do that make people upset, angry, or make them feel put off. And after I spent a weekend with myself, engaging in these exercises, and it's something I improvised in the beginning, and now for me it's something I try to do on a regular basis. It definitely helped me to realize what my potential is, to realize what I bring to the table, to be realistic about who I am as a person. And I think we are not self-examinatory. We do not look inside ourselves often enough. I think as a society, we tend to believe what advertising tells us, what marketing tells us, what our parents told us 30 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. And I've decided that I'm going to rewrite history, in a sense. And now that has worked for me. What would work for our listener who's trying to achieve those same goals?
There's a way you can do that. I really like that idea, by the way. It's just very strong. It follows all the rules of how do you start reinventing yourself. And there is a way that people can do that. It requires the help of a friend. Somebody who, let's say that you decide to go on a weekend retreat. I call it a transformational retreat, but it's just getting away, and getting away is really important. You mentioned that you went to did you say a motel that was between the two cities?
Right, it was in the middle, literally the middle of nowhere, and right in between LA and San Francisco.
Yeah, getting away like that is important, so that you don't have your normal house at home and distractions and family and stuff around you. And a retreat can be, a really effective retreat can be anywhere from, typically it's 2 days. One is a little short, but it'll work, and 3 is really good. And then the reason you bring a friend with you is the friend asks you questions, and the friend has to, if you have to have him sign an agreement, sign it ahead of time that he's not that friend, that facilitator who's going to help you here. He can't even raise an eyebrow at criticism. This is a weekend totally without criticism, because you're never going to open new doors if you're still looking backwards and looking at failings of the past and what doesn't work and so on. And during that time, the secret is in the questions which you ask yourself. But the secret is in asking the right questions. And when you ask someone the right questions, and then in the transformational retreat that I recommend, you actually take a flip chart and an easel pad, and you write out the answers. The person asking you the questions will actually write them out for you, but word for word. So the question is asked, and it starts with who you were when you were born, what your name was, and then you go through your life, the things you've done well, the things you haven't done well. You get to the point where you're looking forward and what you would like to do next. If you could do anything that's possible and actually do that and become that and make it happen, what would it be? And you start to list those things that by the time you get done with that, you realize that, oh my gosh, I got here. And there's a lot more I can do, and I've been selling myself short. And I think, and here's what I choose to do next. And it can be a open door for people. It's really practical and it really works.
And I think that's where a lot of people find themselves. I think a lot of people find themselves busy with their jobs, busy with their families, and now you add into that the constant interruption of your smartphone and your social networking and what have you. And I think people spend very little time.
They spend more time thinking about what they're going to wear to work in the morning than they think about who they are, why they're here, where they can go, and what they can do.
I found it to be the best gift I ever gave myself, and people take this the wrong way when I say it, but until you've done it, you can't understand it. It's to take time to think about myself.
Yeah,
who am I?
When people first think about that, they think, well, isn't that selfish? Well, there's got to be a positive word for that. There's a time to be totally self-focused on who you are really. When you arrived on Earth, you certainly had value, and I happen to believe you even had a purpose. But that, depending on what a person believes spiritually, we recognize somehow that there's got to be a reason. There has to be some reason that I'm here, and there's something that I need to do, or maybe there are several things that I need to do. And yet we get so busy with the job and with relationships and worrying about things and dealing with finances that the last thing on the list, and it's usually the thing that's overlooked entirely, is hold it. Why am I here, really? Who am I? What do I want?
And I don't think most of us know that. I think in general, we have this idea that we want money, or we want to marry a beautiful woman, or we want to have kids. But these are very vague concepts. And I think many times we really need to focus in on not only what we want, but what do we provide to others? I don't think most of us ever think about what value we have to the people we know and the people we encounter. So the result is that we think we have nothing to offer them, and we become self-focused in a bad way.
I just have to agree. I think that a life of an attitude of service is probably one of the best attitudes a person could ever, have. Attitudes are habits, and it's one of the best habits we could ever give ourselves. And that is, what am I doing for other people? How am I genuinely helping them? And it's pretty clear that happiness trainers, people who research and study and teach sort of the rules of happiness, are very clear that it isn't money. That ends up being way low on the list. It isn't that perfect person on our arm. It's a lot of other things that in an average day go pretty well unnoticed. And maybe it's because we're busy. I happen to believe it's because we're programmed to be busy. And when we're busy, it keeps us from thinking about who we really could become. I'm a very